Have you ever questioned the nature of reality? Have you pondered the dimensions we perceive? This is where we find ourselves today, on the cusp of a fundamental understanding of our existence. The concept we're exploring today is four-dimensional biology, a theory that suggests, although we live in a three-dimensional world, our internal physiology and anatomy function as though they were four-dimensional. This is based on the quarter-power scaling laws as universal and uniquely biological as the biochemical pathways of metabolism and the structure and function of the genetic code. The philosopher, Jerry Fodor, in his book What Darwin Got Wrong, stated, although living things occupy a three-dimensional space, their internal physiology and anatomy operate as if they were four-dimensional. Quarter-power scaling laws are perhaps as universal and as uniquely biological as the biochemical pathways of metabolism, the structure and function of the genetic code. Jerry Fodor further comments, the conclusion here is inescapable, that the driving force for these invariant scaling laws cannot have been natural selection. This is because natural selection operates on a three-dimensional level of an organism, and four-dimensional quarter-power scaling laws would simply be invisible to natural selection to see. But why? To explain this, we turn to the thought experiment of flatland, a two-dimensional world where there's only forwards, backwards, left, and right, with no up and down. The inhabitants of flatland, two-dimensional creatures, have no concept of three-dimensional objects. Imagine a three-dimensional finger poking into their world. It would appear as a filled ellipse. This demonstrates how four-dimensional phenomena are invisible to our three-dimensional perception, and thus how four-dimensional quarter-power scaling would be invisible to natural selection, which operates on the three-dimensional level of organisms. In a 2011 study titled Scaling of Brain Metabolism and Blood Flow in Relation to Capillary and Neural Scaling, it stated that the brain, one of the most energy-demanding organs in mammals, scales with brain volume raised to a power of around 5/6. This value of 5/6 is of a higher dimensional value than the typical quarter-power scaling of biology, which typically relates to whole-body resting metabolism with body mass and several other physiological variables in animals and plants, and suggests that the brain is indeed based upon a higher dimensional principle than the four-dimensional quarter-power scaling principle that the rest of biology is based upon. Moreover, this finding of constant and optimal metabolic activity in the brain contradicts the materialistic view that thought is merely an emergent property of the physical processes of the brain. Materialists hold, as asserted by 18th-century French physiologist Pierre Cabanis, that the brain secretes thought as the liver secretes bile. Yet the brain operates at a constant and optimal 1/6 aerobic metabolic rate, while the rest of the body fluctuates in its metabolic activity. But exactly why should thought, which is presupposed to be a product of the brain as the liver secretes bile, constrain the material brain to operate at such a constant and optimal 1/6 aerobic metabolic rate, whereas the rest of body fluctuates in its metabolic activity? This simply makes no sense on the materialistic view of thought. It seems fairly obvious. The most parsimonious explanation for such an optimal constraint on the brain's metabolic activity is not because thought is a product of the brain as liver secretes bile, as is held by materialists, but simply because the material brain was designed first and foremost to house the immaterial mind and provide it with the most favorable metabolic environment at all times. In summary, four-dimensional biology and the six-dimensional brain is a groundbreaking concept that challenges our understanding of the natural world and our place within it. It suggests that our physiology and anatomy function on a higher dimensional level than we perceive, with implications that extend to our understanding of the brain and mind. This theory raises thought-provoking questions about the nature of reality, the dimensions we perceive, and the complex interplay between our physical and immaterial existence. Indeed, these four-dimensional and six-dimensional findings offer tentative and very suggestive evidence that we do indeed have immaterial souls and minds, just as has been postulated by theists all along.